Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Ludden. I'm a reporter at the Arizona Agenda, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor of this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections is the official sponsor of Arizona debates, so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Voters that are watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time by emailing debates@kc-a.com. You can send a text to 408-302-1810, or you can call 480-937-1253. We may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. Tonight, we'll be hearing from the Republican candidates for the State House and Legislative District 25, which covers parts of both Yuma County and Maricopa County. As this is the primary election debate, candidates are competing against others in their party to become the official party nominee. All registered voters, including independent voters, can vote in the primary. Independent voters can choose a single party ballot they wish to vote. This evening, we'll hear from 3 candidates for the House who will debate their partisan opponents for approximately an hour. Candidates, you'll have about a minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents. If you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments after they conclude speaking, you may do so. I may limit responses for time management purposes, and I remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may be informed. In the House, voters get to vote for 2 candidates. In Legislative District 25, 3 of the candidates with us tonight are incumbent Representative Michael Carbone, Nicholas Cupper, and Steve Markegard. Candidate Gary Garcia Snyder was invited but declined to participate. So we'll start by alphabetical order, then alternate who responds first from there. So let's go ahead and get started with opening statements. Mr. Carbone, you're up first whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, good evening. I'm going to thank the Clean Elections for putting this on. I know you do this every cycle, so thank you for all your hard work and effort to do this to educate our voters. Yes, my name is Michael Carbone. I'm running for LD20 or District 25 for the State House of Representatives. I'm your current elected representative now. I've been there for 2 years and been a resident of Arizona for 10 years. Originally from Illinois, transplant from there, as many people are. Wife of 30 years, 4 beautiful children. Now I have a grandchild since the last time I was here with Clean Elections. So as I say, we're starting our first generation. Small business owner in my past. I've worked in construction, finance, real estate. Here in Arizona, predominantly, I've been working mainly in schools and city as a consultant or a CFO for those types of agencies. So I do understand budgets really, really well. But just glad to be here, and I want to thank everybody again, and I look forward to this evening.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Cupper, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you very much, Clean Elections, for putting this on, and thank you, Nicole, for filling in. I know we had a last-minute moderator change, so I really appreciate you stepping up. My name is Nick Cupper, and I'm running for the State House in Legislative District 25. I'm a retired Air Force member. I was an aircraft electrician for 20 years in the Air Force, and I retired out of Luke Air Force Base. I've been married to my high school sweetheart for almost 20 years, and together we have 4 children, including 1 daughter who's disabled. We adopted her from Armenia while we were stationed in England. And actually her disability is why the Air Force sent us here to Luke Air Force Base. We moved here in October of 2020, and we've loved it ever since. We're originally from Oregon and grew up in a small farm town. And, once we got here, we realized this was the place to stay. This was an amazing state. And I'm just very happy to run for this office and hope for your vote. Thank you very much.
All righty, thank you. Mr. Markegard, whenever you're ready.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate all the work that Clean Commissions does. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in Seattle, Washington. I'm the youngest of 4 boys. After I graduated from high school, I attended and completed a 4-year trade school. I had a 40-year plus career in industrial, commercial, and marine insulation businesses. After I served on an executive board for a union, I negotiated contracts 10 years later, a decade later, I had my own business and did the same thing for the employers groups. I'm a retired man. I moved to Arizona 5.5 years ago. I currently live in Sun City Festival in Buckeye. I'm a native, my wife is a native Arizonan, and we both are active in our community. We are both precinct committeemen, and we are both state delegates for the Republican Party. Together, we have 4 children and 5 grandchildren. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and get started with some questions. I wanted to start out with some key topics of the legislative session that just wrapped up. Lawmakers referred HCR 2060, or the Secure the Border Act, to November's ballot. Among other things, the measure would let local law enforcement arrest undocumented border crossers. Will you support HCR 2060, and why or why not? If you could explain your reasoning. And Mr. Cupper, you're up first for this one.
All right, thank you for the question. You know, I like to answer things directly first. So yeah, I would support the HCR. And I think it goes back to the Constitution, really. You know, I'm a huge fan of states' rights. You know, we have to remember that the states create the federal government, not the other way around. And the Constitution is very clear that all rights are reserved to the states unless they're explicitly given to the federal government. And there's very little explicitly given to the federal government. Even the border, honestly, is not given as a right to the federal government. It's given as a responsibility. You know, it is the federal government's responsibility to protect our border. However, if they're going to abdicate their responsibility, I believe it's on us as a state to take up that mantle. I was actually speaking with someone at a forum the other day about this, and I gave the example of if I'm sitting here and I was speaking to a husband and wife, and I said, if this gentleman over here starts attacking this man's wife, it's that man's responsibility to defend his wife. But if he doesn't defend the wife, I'm going to step in, even though it's not my base responsibility. I'm going to step in and do it. And I think as a state, that's what we need to do. I do think in our current form, it could put a bit more strain on our police force. But I believe that it's something we have to get in place. And I think we have to make sure that we're protecting our state. You know, in the last year alone, we had enough illegal immigrants come through Arizona. It equaled 8% of our state's population. So whether they're coming over with weapons or not, that is an invasion. So I do support the HCR.
Okay, Mr. Markegard?
Yes, without a doubt. HCR 2060 we need this. We need to stop the border. We got to plug it up. We got to commit to having a safe environment for our citizens. This border costs the taxpayers $3.2 billion each year. That was reported in 2023. The crime, the fentanyl, the drugs, the sex trafficking, we have to be able to stop unvetted illegals, not migrants, illegals crossing this border. I am in strong support of it. I am strong support of safety for our citizens. That's the number one thing we have to do is provide safety. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Carbone?
Yes, obviously I voted for it, supported on the floor. And the best thing about this bill is because we're bringing it to the voters, letting them make the decision what's best for the state of Arizona. We have a divided government. We don't have a Republican governor. So it made it a lot more challenging, but it gives us one of the opportunities to bring it to an HCR, to a resolution to the voters and make it a constitutional amendment. We have to protect our borders. Without borders, we don't have a state, we don't have a country. We put, even in your own home, if you don't have, we put fences up and gates up all the time. And it's a form of protection and privacy and security. Look, we've, in the last 3.5 years, 10+ million people have crossed the border through our port of entry, plus 2 million are what they call gotaways. That's what this bill helps. It goes after the gotaways. It gives our law enforcement the opportunity and the protections so they can do their job and protect our state and our families. And in our district alone, 1.5 million folks have crossed just Yuma in the last 3.5 years. That's 500,000 a year. So it's a good bill. It's a strong bill. It's not perfect like anything else, but the things it does what it needs to do, and that's to arrest the folks that are coming here illegally, not through the port of entry. Thank you.
Okay. I want to move on to another very big topic of this legislative session that just wrapped up. Do you believe Arizona lawmakers were right to repeal the territorial era law that bans abortions in all cases except to save the mother's life? And where do you draw the line when it comes to abortion? And I believe, Mr. Markegard, you're up first.
Well, I believe I'm pro-life, and this is a real emotional topic. We haven't wound up where we started off many years ago. I believe that abortion is a tragedy, and we need to educate people that can't change their heart to keep that baby. I'm in favor of 15 weeks, the first trimester, and in case of rape and incest, in the life of the mother. And outside of that, that's where I stand. And we have to protect the life of the unborn. And the far left is going to go off the table with this. Now they're aborting children at birth. We've got to stop, and we've got to get back to moral values. And it's just going too far to the left. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Carbone.
So 2 years ago on this same night, well, not this exact night, but you asked me that question, and I've been running, being a person who was on the pro-life board back in Illinois for several years. I've always been an advocate in the sense of the life of the mother, with the three exceptions. This is between the mother, the father, the family, their significant others, their doctor, and their spiritual leader advisor, and that's it. First of all, 15 weeks is what is going to be law now. We're just in line like China, Russia, and North Korea. Think about that. So right, wrong, or different, that's where our law will be 15 weeks. Most of the civilized world is at a high at 12 weeks. So that's just for educational purposes, so people understand what's out there. So 15 weeks, and then there's gonna be a ballot measure that's gonna be taxpayer funded, that if it passes, because it'll become a constitutional amendment to the state of Arizona, it'll be for any age of any woman who has any age without parental consent, and then you can do all the way up to the day of birth. I know Arizonans don't believe in that. I think that 15 weeks is where it's at, is where it should stay, and that's the debate there. What law is going to be 15 weeks versus what's going to go on the ballot, and that's the conversation today. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Copper.
So had I been there and had a vote on the day that it was repealed, I would have voted to keep it. I liked that they had a provision there to protect the woman in case there was a medical emergency and there was something that was going to keep her, or something that may have killed her or whatever. This is pretty personal to me. I mentioned earlier that I have an adopted daughter, and she's in a wheelchair. She actually is a twin. Her twin is perfectly healthy. And in Armenia, the doctors told her mother when she was pregnant that they should abort our daughter, Guyana, because she'd have no quality of life, and they could keep the healthy twin. I would argue with anybody that my daughter has the best quality of life of anyone you ever meet. She has a fantastic life, and I thank God every day that her mother did not choose abortion. I'm very pro-life, but I am also pro-woman in the fact that I don't think we as a society, and definitely not as a state, do enough to protect women. I don't think nearly the amount of women that we have in our state and in our country who feel the need to abort, it's abhorrent. We shouldn't ever have a woman who feels that they have to abort. We should be there to protect them, to take care of them. And I think it really starts with men. Men as a group, we're not doing our jobs. We have a sex culture these days that's encouraging these pregnancies to happen. And then we have this culture of men just running off. So I think it starts with us as men stepping up and doing the right thing. But I think as a state, what we need to do is better take care of women when they are pregnant so they don't feel that abortion is their only need.
Okay, so is there a certain timeline you would support, or no certain?
Well, yeah, I guess I can be more clear with it. I would have supported the previous law, the law that was original from 1864 and was ratified by the Democrat governor in 1977.
Okay, thank you. I want to bring in a viewer question. Will you uphold the Constitution and value the separation between church and state? Is the question. Mr. Carbone, you're up first this time.
Can it be a little more clear? Like just church and state, the separation? I mean, or is there a certain topic that's referred to? Because that's pretty broad.
Sure. I guess, how do you practice the idea of the separation between church and state as a legislator?
Okay.
How
Yeah.
would you?
So yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a separation of church and state. We've all grown up to that. We know that. I've practiced that as a legislator. I don't believe there's been any infringement upon the government when it comes to our faith outside of prayer in the chamber. But I would, and I'll add to this, because here's where I think this topic might be going to: the 10 Commandments. I support the 10 Commandments. I think I said it on the floor. People do have issue to that. It's 10 rules. 10 rules that was in the beginning of man, that was recorded in the beginning of time. And when people have challenges with those 10 rules, I, as a human, say, well, I would ask, what's the problem? What's wrong with those rules? We should adhere to those. They're the most common things throughout humanity. So with that, there's a debate about that being that's because it's religion. I don't see it that way. I see it as 10 rules. You want to tie it to a Christian movement, or in this case was Old Testament, so it wasn't even Christian. It was for all people in the world. So I'm just going to add that because that's where I think this is going. So thank you.
Okay. Mr. Cupper, I believe you're up next.
Sure. So that's an interesting question. First off, the separation of church and state is not actually in the Constitution. It was something that was brought up by Thomas Jefferson. And I would say broadly, I agree with it. But it's something where I don't think any religious person at all, regardless of what their religion is, can say that they're going to legislate without having any influence from their religion. If you truly are religious, for whatever your religion is, you're going to have aspects of your life that were guided by your beliefs. We all have a set of beliefs, whether they're religious or not. We have beliefs. So I can't sit here and say that when I go to the legislature that I'm going to have zero Christian influence in my decision making. That would be a lie. And anyone who says the same would be lying as well if they say that their religion won't influence, or their lack of religion won't influence. That being said, I'm not necessarily pro or con to what Mr. Carbone was saying, Representative Carbone was saying about having the 10 Commandments in the school. I think if a school decides they want to have that, then so be it. If the school decides they don't want to have it, then so be it. I'm very traditional as far as I think the founding of our country had to do with individual liberties. And I very much support the individual's liberty to do what they please, so long as it's not like physically affecting somebody else.
Okay. Mr. Murkygard?
Yes, our Constitution does not mandate any particular religion. However, our Constitution was written in biblical principles. So, I completely will uphold the Constitution, but I am totally adamant about our forefathers, how they created our Constitution with biblical morals in mind. And that is how this Constitution in our state has been so powerful. Anybody can practice any religion that they choose to, and the state can't mandate what they do, treat, whatever religious values they have. But I always want to keep in mind the fact that it should be taught in our schools that our Constitution was written with biblical moral values, and that needs to be taught, and that needs to be known as a history as a nation. Thank you.
Gotcha. Okay, I do want to move on to housing. This is a big issue among voters. The housing crisis in Arizona presents really complex challenges for policymakers. Can you outline your comprehensive plan to address this issue? And I believe, Mr. Cupper, you're up first for this one.
So I'm not gonna lie, I don't have a comprehensive plan at the moment to address this issue. I have not been legislature yet, and I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse. I can see these things though. I'm not blind. I think all of us here in Arizona who are paying any kind of attention can see the housing issues that we have. What I can say is, in my years in the Air Force as a maintainer, we don't come up with Band-Aid solutions. I think far too often legislators on either side of the aisle often do come up with Band-Aid solutions without really digging in and getting to the root of the problem. As a maintainer, we always had to dig in and get to the root of the problem, because if we don't solve it correctly, it means pilots' lives are at risk. And honestly, to the same extent, we have people's lives at risk if we don't get housing right, because if we don't get housing right, it's going to create even more homelessness. And we all know what happens with homelessness and how people's lives are at a greater risk of dying, especially veterans. So, like I said, I don't currently have a comprehensive plan, but what I'm happy to do is talk to the stakeholders, talk to the experts. I'm not someone to act like I know everything there is to know. I'm not going to be the smartest person in every room. This is not the Nick Cupper show. My job as your elected legislator is to listen to the people who are most involved in this, and then make the wisest decision I can make to try to better our state.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe it would be better to reframe this question as any specific policies you would support in the legislature. And Mr. Cupper, if you want to answer it that way, feel free, but I'm just sort of trying to provide
Any
some
specific policies? So
yeah.
No specific policies. I'd go back to the fact that I'm a free market guy. I think a lot of our issues that we have with housing come from the fact that the government intervenes far too often, actually. So I think the government's basic role, well, in our state, the Constitution in the state requires that we make a budget and that we actually pass a budget. Beyond that, our role is to protect freedoms. If we're doing things that go too far outside of that scope, which I think often we do, then I think we're actually causing issues unintentionally, but we're causing some of these issues like these housing issues. So I would actually be more of a hands-off approach from the legislative standpoint.
Okay, Mr. Markegard, housing policy, any ideas there?
Well, first of all, I don't think the legislators in the state of Arizona are going to fix this problem. The problem will be fixed when we get a new president, President Trump, and we go back to his policies and interest rates come down. That's the start. The climate policies with the green energy debacle, and in my opinion, has raised prices on everything. It costs more money to move trucks, to material prices have gone up. We need to get back to policies that incentivize lower pricing. When we free up energy, everything's going to come back down. We need to be energy independent, not dependent. We have areas that are having housing developments that are going up, and they only have one source of energy, and it's electricity. We have to have gas, natural gas, and those things, so we have choices. We had to go back to the policies that were of old, not these new policies. Homelessness and affordability, they go together. We need to get back to old policies that President Trump had in place. This all got changed when Biden's policies took effect, and they're not positive. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Carbone.
Yeah, first of all, our district specifically, average home is about $460,000 between Buckeye and Yuma. And then you compound that with the interest rates. It's kind of a double-edged sword. They're both going up. We have homelessness. We have baby boomers are coming, retiring at the fastest pace than anybody, any age group. They're also the fastest growing homeless population by age group. And we need 226,000 units in this state. We need 7.2 million units in the country for houses. And so the first fix is supply. And how do you create supply? You got to create the labor force to do that. That's the correction, and that doesn't happen overnight. I did pass 2 bills that got signed by the governor. It was on a bipartisan effort on housing. One was noted as the Casita bill, accessory dwelling units. The other one was middle housing. Middle housing really helps. Both bills actually help a blue collar developer, the guy that does the small jobs and come and do, and they don't need a lot of capital to start up. So that helps there. But the Casita bill, which is about property rights, allows you to build a little unit in the backyard for these folks, whether they're retiring, you want to get your kids in there because they can't afford. It gives them a leg up, so they're not paying these high rents in the state. You see these build-to-rent units all over. These projects. I call them the projects of the future. They're terrible. And you see these little small 640 square foot units between 8 and 1,200 square foot, 640 square units, and they're charging $1,800 to $2,200 for rent for a 1 bedroom. that is a demand on our public education, our police, doesn't give good tax revenue to the agency. It's terrible policy. And things, if I were to look in, I'm already been looking at for the future, is housing for our vets and for our seniors. We don't have folks, at least in Buckeye specific, but also in the West Valley, there's not a lot of folks that can go there. Seniors have somewhere to live. They're put on a waiting list. And what's happening in our district specifically, because I saw these folks several times at the senior center, they're put on a waiting list, and there's a choice that our state has to make. Do I put the single mom with children, or do I put the elderly woman who has nowhere to go? That is a terrible position to put anybody in. We have to fix that. There's not a perfect answer, and it's not going to happen overnight, but we have to do something to what Mark Egard said, and I'll add to that. We need to change policies at the national level, but we have to do what we can in our state level, and we're trying at the legislature in every way in doing so. Those two bills, 2720, HB 2720, HB 2721, both help that in a small way, but long-term it'll help in a big way.
I'd like to make a comment on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I commend Michael for doing what he's doing. My concern on that conceded bill is in a lot of cases, it's going to lower property owners' values. There's not any real code on some of these things to put up structures. They don't have to match the existing structure, and people are concerned about their property values going down. I agree, we have a housing issue, and you can't just fix it by just passing. It's not even safe buildings. We have to have buildings to code, complete code to match the existing structures. We have, and like Michael said, I agree. This is going to take some time to fix. We are at a growth rate here in Arizona, just like I witnessed in Washington State. I moved here and I've seen the same things happening that I witnessed in Washington over the last 20 years. And it's just, there is no quick fix situation. Policies, federal policies, and patience, and stop just going full out, full on, trying to fix things. We got to back up, take a breath, and be comprehensive about it, not just putting out something that we can just build or put any structure on.
Okay. And, yeah, if you want to respond to that quickly, Mr. Carbo.
Absolutely. First of all, it is safe. You still have to get an architectural drawing. You still have to follow zoning codes, which is my opponent just said. He's been in construction, so he should know zoning. This is something that the city's overregulated. So the state had to step in. We have to find some way, and it's about property rights. I believe in the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution lets us own property. And in our property, we should be able to do what we want with it, as long as it doesn't affect public safety. Look how it looks and this and that. That's up to the property owner, and it's up to the city. The city has guidelines that they can follow through what they call zoning ordinances. So with that, it's a safe. You still need an architectural stamp. You need an engineering stamp to build it. You can't just fly by night, just put it up. You still have to go through the zoning process. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to somewhat of a related question. Arizonans are suffering some of the highest inflation rates in the country right now. And this viewer wants to know, what is your plan to reduce price gouging from corporations and reduce the cost of housing and groceries? We talked about housing, but I think inflation in general, any specific policies there? And Mr. Carbone, you're up first on this one.
Was it the gouging on housing?
They ask in housing and groceries. Since we covered housing, I think
housing and groceries.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me answer the housing first. So first of all, my bill does that. HB 2720 actually does that, which was a concern with the cities, what they call short-term rentals out there. The only way you can short-term rental properties, you have to live there, because we do have greedy big developers like the build-to-rent units that are being built all over the cities. This can allow a hedge fund manager to come in or a corporate guy to come in, and that's actually not a big issue. This protects the cities and the people and their property rights. It's about home ownership. That's why we target it that way. When it comes to the recession of the food, we tried doing repealing the food tax across the state. We could not get that through. The governor vetoed that. This would help folks. even if it was as little as $25 a month, we have groceries that have doubled and tripled. And at a state level, all we can do is that's the best we can do. Some cities don't have a food tax, some do. We tried pushing that through last year as a bill, and she vetoed that bill to eliminate the food tax. As far as Washington, we can't do much for them. And if they change things, we had better policies that even what Trump had done when we were rich on resources, energy, food was low. We were all doing good. We're doing very well. I mean, I know prior to COVID, myself and everyone I knew in my family were doing great, even here and back east. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cupper.
Yeah, our inflation issues are something that the state itself is going to have very little that they can do. As Representative Carbone said, it really becomes a federal issue because you have to remember, yes, we do a lot within our state, but we're a globally connected economy. You know, there are things that we're getting in our state that are coming from around the world. There are different connections we have from around the world, and so much of our inflation is going to be dealt with directly by policies from the federal government. That being said, I am not a fan at all of having a grocery tax. I don't love the idea of telling a city what they can or can't do, but I would encourage cities to not have a grocery tax at a bare minimum. If they're going to have a sales tax, I support sales tax, but I support it without charging on essentials like groceries. You know, I think as a state, there are some things we've done, like Representative Carbone's Kutsia bill, that are going to work to assist this. But once again, you know, we're a capitalist economy. We have a free market. And I really, truly believe that one of the best things we can do is go through and try to limit what we're trying to control, the puppet mastering we're trying to do as the state when it comes to our market. Because I think, unfortunately, the secondary and tertiary effects of the decisions that we make in the legislative proposals we put forward end up costing us more money in the long run.
Okay, Mr. Markegard.
Well, inflation. Remember in 2020 when President Biden enacted his Inflation Reduction Act? It did the opposite because his policies changed. They were the opposite of what they were. So I really believe it is at the federal level. I'm not so certain that there's price gouging from business owners. There may be a little bit of that, but at the same time, it comes from federal policies that are changing the market and the way we live and what we can afford. You're right. Everything has gone up. Everything. You remember the little stickers of Joe Biden? He points at stuff and it says, "I did that." This is about Joe Biden's policies. This is not about just things going up in price. His policies affect and have affected inflation. And we got to get back to the old policies so we can move our country forward. This is about federal level policies. Thank you.
Okay, and speaking of the federal government, this viewer wants to know, given Arizona's near majority revenue source is intergovernmental transfers, according to the state treasurer's revenue report, what are your plans to make Arizona less reliant on federal funding? And Mr. Markegard, you're up first for this one.
Can you run that by me one more time?
I sure can. Given Arizona's near majority revenue source is intergovernmental transfers, according to the state treasurer's revenue report, what are your plans to make Arizona less reliant on federal funding?
I don't think we'll ever be less reliant on federal funding. Quit spending more money on the federal level. You know, that's a tough question. And I really believe that if we stay within our own box in Arizona and we maintain I commend a legislation that they passed a budget that actually cut the budget by 10%, and they kept the things that are important, the ESA programs. We have to, overall, we have to rely on the federal government to lower interest rates. We have to maintain the fact that we have to live within our budget like we're doing and wait for overall federal changes to take place so we can get in line with them. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Carbone, your thoughts on reliance on federal funding?
This is a great question because I've been fighting for 2 years asking the same question. because you hear this big word, matching dollars. Now I get the matching dollars and I'm not against that. However, those matching dollars come with a price sometimes. If it doesn't come with a price, it's one thing. Now I'm not saying it has to be perfect, but here's the thing, we're addicted to federal money. I just discovered this 2 months ago, finding out that we're one of the highest in the Southwest region of collecting per capita federal money versus state. And I've heard the comment saying, well, it's because we know how to play the game. Look, the game is Washington's trying to control our state when we take that money. I am firmly against that. I'm not saying I'm totally against it, because we do need it. And there are certain good things that we get our tax dollars back that we pay to the federal government here in the state of Arizona. So we collect that money back. However, our federal government's printing money to give to people. Hence COVID. They printed money, trillions of dollars, not collecting taxes. They printed money to give to all the states. This is insanity. It's going to blow up at some point here. So when it comes to the federal monies, our schools like Title I, Title II, Title III, I used to write these grants. I know all about them. But the thing is, when they come in and we write that grant, we become dependent on it. We become addicted to it. And now we have these big arguments all the time at the legislature talking about whether we should have a bathroom for a boy or girl and all this stuff, because why? Title I, we took that money and that's what it says. Now we're perplexed. It's going against Arizonan values. It's going to those community values. And then now these cities don't know what to do, or these school districts don't know what to do. We can talk about what it's transportation, medical. I mean, you can go down the list in the federal dollars. The biggest money we bring in is medical. Now we want to help people, but to me, it's the wrong way of doing things. I would rather be whole and be our own master, if you will, in the state, saying, look, we collect our own money and we can protect our own people. That's how we should be doing business. And then we should be asking the question every time federal dollars are mentioned, what comes with that string? Thank you.
All right, Mr. Cupper.
Thanks for the question. So after 20 years in the military, you can probably imagine I've seen a lot of wasted money. And I don't think any of us, regardless of which side of the aisle we're on, truly believes that the government doesn't waste money. So one of the very first things I want to do is I want to really dig in and understand where we're spending our money and where we can be much more efficient. I guarantee you we can be much more efficient in nearly every facet of what we're doing. And if we can be much more efficient, that can start to wean us off of the federal dollars. But going back to what I mentioned earlier about being a states' rights fan, we're far too reliant on federal government. We're far, far too reliant. We do things like with the Department of Education, which didn't exist before 1979, and we became the world superpower without it. But now we have the Department of Education pushing things down on us and saying, well, you have to do X, Y, or Z because we're giving you money. There's a time and a place when you have to weigh the consequences of not taking the money versus taking the money and what's going to come along with it, and you have to just say no. And we're going to go about it on our own way and do what is greater. You know, when I was in the military, at the end of my career is when the COVID DoD vaccine mandate came out. And the biggest issue we had was it was an unapproved version of a shot, as all the DoD had. I said no to taking it, knowing that I might lose my retirement and lose my medical for my daughter. I mean, my daughter's medical is hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. But I was willing to say no and be able to lose my retirement because I knew what was the right thing to do. The right thing was not to take a version of the shot that was illegal to mandate. And at the end of the day, I was saved by a court. They gave me an injunction, saved my career, allowed me to retire. It's the same concept here. When we know what's right and what's wrong, we have to be willing to stand up to what is right. And I truly believe that courage is contagious. And if we make that move, other states may follow suit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do want to touch on the state budget lawmakers recently passed. That cut more than $1.4 billion to make ends meet after overspending last year. In your opinions, what was the most damaging cut in that budget? And are there any areas of government you think should have been cut deeper or perhaps instead? And Mr. Cupper, you're up first for this one.
Well, I think it may be clear by now that I'm pretty fine with cuts overall. I do think government is far too large. That being said, when we do cuts, we do have to be smarter about it. I haven't gone line by line through the budget, so I'm not going to speak out of turn and pretend like I know exactly which area I think could have been slightly better or not. But I can say from a broad strokes perspective that cuts I think are good. I think we're spending far too much as it is. But there's areas we can't skimp on. You know, things like education, I don't think is an area we can skimp on because it's literally an investment in our future. And I don't mean to sound preachy here or sound cliche, but it truly is. You know, what we put into education is the adults that we produce later on in life that are running our society. And if we're not teaching them properly and giving them all the tools they need, we're going to fail. So I'm not a big fan of cutting education. That being said, I am a huge fan of making sure that we spend properly within education, even if we spend the same amount, allocating it better. For instance, our teachers in this state, by cost of living, make less than any other teachers in the entire nation. That's reprehensible. That is not okay. So I think, you know, cuts are good overall, but it's something where we have to be exact with it and not do it like a wrecking ball. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Markegard.
When I ran businesses, I had like 3 or 4 different divisions at one time. And when before the year started, I would go to the division managers and I tell them we're all going to point for a 20% cut in each division. And with our budget here in Arizona, 10% cut is very reasonable. You could find another 5% very easy. But we also understand the fact that we have a Democrat governor that wanted to get rid of things. So it's about negotiations. It's about reaching some common ground at different particular times. And at this time right now, our legislature was up against the wall. They've got a Democrat governor, and it's very hard to get everything you want and to cut more than what they got. And I do. I understand the negotiation process. I understand logic, and more would be better. There's way too much government spending, way too much on the federal level, on the local level. And the thing is Joe Citizen doesn't realize and understand all the monies that we're getting from the federal government and COVID and all these other programs. We don't understand that. I'd like to know where all the money went for the infrastructure program. Where's all that money been spent? So yeah, I'm concerned, but also at the same time, you gotta give people credit for what they do when they do it and realize how they've done that. And that's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carbone.
Yeah, well, the budget was tough compared to last year from my inexperience, and I've dealt with lots of budgets, whether school budgets, cities or towns, you know, and dealing with those when you're dealing with your council members or school boards. A lot different animal here, but you're dealing with the whole entire state. So, in a nutshell, it was good because we cut spending, we lowered our budget, and that's always good because at the end of the day, I have a very big strength is in efficiencies, why I get hired by these different agencies or schools. Going all the way back to when I was elected to a school board almost 15, 16 years ago, the first thing I did during 2008, we had the mass Great Recession. So I said, if folks at home can make it work at their house, why can't we as a school district? We went, and I'm a business guy, so we went line by line, and we shaved 15 cents on the dollar in that district. And we didn't hurt anybody programs. We didn't cut programs. We were able to find efficiencies. When you talk about inefficiencies in our state, one of the things I would like to tackle in the future is on the access side. We know there's 10 to 15% inefficiencies. As our governor stated, they called it fraud. They had to hire 101 people to find fraud. It's one of the things I was not happy about because we don't need those folks. Why are we hiring 101 people to find fraud to pay for itself? It's backwards. I said, why don't you hire a third-party firm? And again, we had to take federal money to those employees. We get a match. We get 11 million match on that. But why not hire a third-party firm to come in and find the fraud and then take, whether you save money or not, but you can increase and make the program better in access for kids, giving them dental, giving them eye and vision, which they don't have for those poor families. But at the end of the day, it's about efficiencies, and we can do that. But you need a group of like-minded minds that are willing to tackle that on in this case. But at the end of the day, we shaved over $1 billion. Our state should be proud. We have a 2.5% state income tax, which is the lowest in the country outside the states that have zero state income tax. So proud to be an Arizonan.
Okay, thank you. This next one is a really popular question that's come up. Do you believe Joe Biden is the duly elected president? And will all of you accept the results of the 2024 presidential election? Let's see here. Mr. Carbone, you're up first.
Okay. Here's the thing. I'm not going to go into hypotheticals. The guy's in there. I think everybody in the country knows there's something wrong. I'm going to say it this way because I said it in testimony in my committee for one of my election bills. I asked everyone, if you look at the state of Arizona and leave everything out, just like take our state, take 2018, 2020, and 2022, and you tell me you don't think there's something wrong with our election cycle. We've lost a distrust amongst our electorate, not only in Arizona, we have it at the national level. My bill, which would have been an HCR, but also a regular bill, mimicked Florida law. It does what Florida does. Florida, in 1999, the most embarrassing national embarrassment, domestic and international, we had the hanging chad between Biden and Gore and Bush. They fixed it. It took them a few years. They fixed it. And in 20 years, 10 election cycles, we've had Democrats and Republicans win in that state. That's how we bring the trust back to the American people and to our Arizonans, at least in our state. They did it. We can do it, but no one disagrees. In those 3 election cycles, there was a problem because long lines, whatever you want to say, all the paper, whatever. The point is, we're in the 21st century, folks. This is not normal to have the problems we have, waiting 2-3 weeks or days. That is not normal. We have the technology. We have the manpower that would be willing to do it. Thank you.
Okay, so when you say, not answering hypotheticals, do you have a direct answer on if you believe Joe Biden was duly elected?
There's a problem with the elections. And in 2020, there was a big problem. And it's documented as ballot harvesting all across our country. And so you can take it for that. He's our president now. It's over with. I don't cry over spilt milk. You understand? So that's how I'll answer it.
Okay, Mr. Cupper.
All right. So I don't believe he was duly elected, but that's my belief. It's not founded on anything necessarily factual. And I say that because I haven't seen all the data. And I'm not going to speak out of turn and say I know for sure that this is the case. My gut tells me, yeah, there was probably enough fraud and other things in there that things went wrong and that he likely shouldn't be there. But as I said, I mentioned this earlier, I'm not someone who's going to go speak out of turn and tell you that I know something when I don't know for sure. So do I know that it was fraudulent? I don't know. I haven't seen the data. I'm a huge data guy. I'm a huge numbers guy. I'd like to look into that and understand. But regardless of what has happened already in all the court cases and everything else, the point is, whether there is or isn't fraud at the moment, there is a huge lack of belief in our election system right now. So even with no fraud, that huge lack of belief is a problem because it's going to keep people away from voting. It's going to put distrust in the system, period. When people vote, they're not going to necessarily believe that their vote is being counted. And we need to rebuild that trust. And that's going to take a bunch of different avenues that we're going to have to go down to rebuild that trust. Like I said, even if things are actually, let's say everything's perfect and everything's on the up and up, perception is reality. And we need to be able to change that perception. And if there is a reality of fraud, then we need to fix that for sure. One thing I would love to see a one-day election. I'd like to see in person one day, make it a holiday so as many working people as possible can get out there and have an ID check and go that route. And I'm sure there's exceptions. I was in the military, obviously, and I traveled around the world, so I used to get absentee ballots. I'm fine with an absentee ballot if there's a situation like that. But short of that, like I said, I would like to see a one-day vote. I'd like to see an ID, and I'd like to bring trust back to our elections. Thanks.
Okay, and will you accept the results of the 2024 election?
Sorry, I did forget that part of the question. I accepted the results of this one. I'll accept the next one. That being said, if there's enough evidence, of course, and it goes to court, let's say somebody brings it to court. What I do right now in my retirement is I work as a paralegal. Just because something finishes doesn't mean it's actually done correctly. I think we all know that. We've seen plenty of lawsuits. And so, yes, I would naturally accept it unless there's enough evidence to sway it the other way and a court determines that no, it was not.
Okay. Mr. Markegard.
I'll answer your question first and then go on.
Sure.
Will I accept the results? Well, we're going to have to see. I'm going to see how the process plays out. The last election and during the COVID, you saw all these things going on. We had unmanned ballot boxes. We had machines that stopped working. We had paper ballots, printers not work. We had all these things going on. We need to not keep trying to recreate the wheel. We have these high-tech machines going on and voting ballots with the high-tech in control of these machines. We need to go back to paper ballot, voter ID, proof of citizenship, no machines, one-day voting, as the Arizona Constitution states, hand count. We keep moving the box to the other side. We keep making things more complicated, not less complicated and simple. Then we will have voter trust, voter confidence. We just got to get back to the basics. I hate to say that, but this modern technology is taking us off the cliff. We should be able to trust the vote and that each vote is counted. There's too many variables going on right now. And if any one element goes wrong, it could change and flip elections. So we do need to have voter trust. It's American way. And we've gone off, we're acting like a third world country. And I really hope we can get leadership back in state and federal level that changes this chaos, because it is chaos right now. And I pray to God that this election goes smoothly and we do get the right results. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know if you directly answered. Do you believe Joe Biden is duly elected?
Do I believe he's duly elected?
Correct.
According to our Constitution, yeah, he got the electorate, didn't he? According to our Constitution, he's the president. That's my answer.
Okay. And will you accept the results of the 2024 election?
Depends. I told you that depends. Depends about how the process plays out.
Just wanted to clarify. Thank you. I think this is going to be our last question here. I do want to touch on ESAs, big topic, especially with the budget. Obviously, Arizona Empowerment Scholarship accounts, they allow students to use taxpayer money that would ordinarily go to a public school to attend a private school instead. Lawmakers opened up ESAs to all students in Arizona in recent years. Do you support making these school vouchers available to every Arizona student, even if it does cause a strain on the state's budget? And Mr. Markegard, you're up first for this one.
Well, the ESA program is perfect. We're the leaders in this state. Other states are following suit with the ESA program. It's schools a choice. It gives parental choice. The taxpayer dollars are $15,000 per child. The ESA program only allows $7,000 go to the child. So the state still gets to keep more than half of that money. There should be no complaints from Governor Hobbs about the ESA program. If a parent wants to have their child in a school that they feel they're going to get better education, that should be exactly what should happen. I am totally in favor of the ESA program, and it's going to get expanded. I believe in competition. Competition breeds better education. Our school systems need to be educating American values. It should be education, not indoctrination. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Carbone.
Oh yeah, that's why I got into this race 2 years ago. My opponent was the one vote that killed school choice. I've been fighting and been an advocate for school choice for going on over 15 years back to Illinois. And we have the best model in school in K-12 education in the country, and states are following us. We have homeschool, we have private school, we have district school and charter school. And we should be proud of that, because now we gave it back to the parents where it's supposed to be. They can make what's the decision that's best for their children than the schools are trying to do, because at the end of the day, we spend the most money in the world, and we have one of the worst results for student achievement. But you look at the other ones, homeschoolers, private and charters, they don't have these issues. And when we talk about accountability, you know, I brought this out in my subcommittee, my appropriation subcommittee this year, that we discovered, it took us a year to find out, but the schools are sitting on $6.5 billion in cash. So when we talk about, you know, an ESA program that's only been around for 2 years, folks, 2 years, and an education system that's been around here for a generation, over almost a century, And we want to talk about accountability. Let's talk about the $11.2 million spent on gift cards given kids who gave shots in Phoenix Union. I have a whole list of these things. We can go about accountability. You can go to the Auditor General now has put on their website all the fraud or the money that's stolen in public education. Right, it's new. It's about 1.7 million, I think, this prior year. You know, or the bonds. Let's talk about all the bonds. We had the highest bond activity, over billions of dollars in Maricopa County specific this year than ever in our history. And when you take private schools and charter schools, they don't get the bond. On the average, charter schools, 9 to 11% of their budget is their mortgage or their lease. When schools need money, they go above and beyond. At a $15,400 a kid versus $7,000 a kid, we save money by putting kids in their school choice programs. I'm for public ed. I want to make public ed. Having the 4 models will make public education better. But when we want to sit there and pick fights, I'm the wrong guy to pick a fight with because I know education, I know finance, and I know those budgets. And I know our budget because I'm only getting better as the time goes on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cupper.
I'm a big fan of ESA. All 4 of my children use it. And my one disabled daughter, we would not be able to properly take care of her the way that we believe she needs taken care of if we didn't have the access to the ESA program. And like Mr. Markegard said, he's absolutely right. The average cost of a public school student is roughly $15,000, whereas the average cost of an ESA student is $7,000. Now, I can acknowledge there gets to be an argument about it bankrupting the state or whatever else because of where the funds are coming from. Public school money, a lot of it comes from property taxes, where ESA money doesn't. It comes from, I believe, the general fund. Someone correct me if I'm wrong there. But we have different buckets. Overall, though, when we're talking about taxpayer dollars, we are saving taxpayer dollars by using ESA. And the great thing about ESA is it just gives options. You know, we don't have to hate public schools to like ESA, and vice versa. You don't have to hate, ESA to like public schools. What's great about it, we've sent our children to private school most of my children's life, I should say, except for 1 year when we were stationed in England, and we sent them on base to a public school. But every other station we've been located at, whether it was our last station in New Jersey or somewhere else, we've had to pay out of pocket and go without certain things. We're a very middle-class family. As you can imagine, a military family doesn't make a lot of money. So when you're paying $2,000+ a month for your student to go to school or students, it's a lot of money. But you go without if you're a parent because you know what you believe is the right thing for your child. But here it's great because our money that we're paying to property taxes, like I said, it's different buckets of money, but the gist of it is that we're not losing that money that the other parents are also getting, right? So I do think that there could be some better guardrails on it. I spent a year on the ESA Parent Advisory Commission for the state, and there are definitely missed expenditures. You're going to have bad actors everywhere, right? You're going to have people who ruin things for everybody else. So I do think that we could put better guardrails on there and prevent people from splurging on, hundreds of thousands of dollars of Legos, for instance, as I saw recently. That I don't think that's necessarily acceptable, but getting rid of it completely is the wrong move. ESA is a phenomenal program, and I will do everything I can to keep it around. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go ahead and move to closing comments. Since Mr. Carbone started opening comments, Mr. Markegard will start with his closing whenever you're ready.
Thank you for for you guys doing this and giving me this opportunity. Our country is in decline, and our state is at a crossroads. As a young man, I learned skills, and I worked with my hands for a living. A decade later, I started businesses, and I provided and grew those businesses so families could support their families from the success I created. In other words, I have learned and developed skills to build things, manage things, and fix things that may even be broken. Our great nation and our state are in need of proven leadership with strong conservative values and a never quit mindset. I will do just that. I'm not doing this to build a career in politics. I've had my career. I'm doing this because I believe I'm doing my civic duty. I've been given so much by our country that I love so much. I was told once, do what you can when you can. And at this time in my life, I can. And I will be your strong conservative voice that is heard in your capital. I humbly ask my constituents in the LD25 district to vote for me Give me your vote. God bless our country. God bless this great state of Arizona, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Cupper.
Thank you again, Clean Elections, and thank you, Nicole, for doing this. And thank you to the two gentlemen who actually showed up tonight. You know, I wish all four of us could have been here, but that obviously wasn't in the cards. You know, I have a heart for service. That's the reason that I served 20 years in the military. And I'm a committed person. That's the reason I committed those 20 years. I've committed 20 years to my wife. I've committed to adopting a disabled girl from Armenia. You know, we've adopted her 8 years ago now. Commitment matters, showing up matters, and doing what actually matters for the people, you know, working in the legislature to better your lives. It's not about us. It shouldn't be about any of us. And I don't think either of these two gentlemen, you know, think it's about them. I think all of us really, truly want to do what we believe is the best for our constituents here in this district and in the state overall. So you as the voters are going to get 2 votes out of the 4 of us. And I ask, you know, I just ask politely that I get one of your votes. You know, I think that I am the right person for this job, and I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Carbone.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for everybody being here this evening. I want to thank Nick and Steve. You know, great job. Look, I think we all care about our state, all 3 of us here. And, you know, it just shows just being here, just away from our families. We talk about serving, you know, servant leadership. I've been a servant leader, I think, my entire life. And always giving back to my community, even going back to when I was in Boy Scouts. Look, I moved here 10 years ago, 2,000 miles away from my family and friends to start over. Picked up my truck, a trailer, brought my wife and 3 kids at the time, or 4 kids, and then now I have a grandson. And, you know, when I was asked to run, it was not an easy decision. I had a very good job. I moved out here for quality of life like everyone else is. I moved out here for the great things, for the freedoms that America offers, because I didn't see it. We lost it out east. And that's why a lot of people are moving to this state specifically, because we have great jobs. We don't have government in our lives, but I saw that happening, especially when we talk about the school choice. Or now we're fighting for our border. We had 41 bills this year that we wrote, one being the main one, which is HCR, because you can't veto that one. We're protecting ESAs, great, the best in the state. Fighting for election integrity, and it's been hard in a divided government. Fighting for water rights, because now we have East Valley and our West Valley and Buckeye moratorium on our water to make sure that we can get that whole again so we can go back to building and growing. Medical freedoms and jobs. This is the greatest state. I've been around this country, lived in all these different states my entire life, and this is the best state. I love this state. I am doing this for my children, for my community. And God gave me these gifts and skills to be able to go and talk and work and get things done. I think I've done that. I've worked really hard. That's my resume up here. My constituents, I know some of them know that. It is not easy. It takes away family time. It's hard. You serve because you want to. You don't do it for any other reason. There's no agenda. I don't think anybody here tonight has an agenda outside to make our state better. So I asked LD25 and the district, or District 25, to support me for re-election. You do get 2 to vote, so I would like and ask kindly for, and humbly, for that 1 vote. And thank you for allowing me to serve you this past 2 years.
Okay, well, that concludes our debate. To our candidates, we thank you so much for participating. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the July 30th primary election. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.